Chapter 10. The Allens, Thorpes, and Morlands all met in the evening at the theatre, and, as Catherine and Isabella sat together, there was then an opportunity for the latter to utter some few of the many thousand things which had been collecting within her for communication in the immeasurable length of time which had divided them. "Oh, heavens, my beloved Catherine, have I got you at last?" was her address on Catherine's entering the box and sitting by her. "Now, Mr. Morland," for he was close to her on the other side, "I shall not speak another word to you all the rest of the evening, so I charge you not to expect it. My sweetest Catherine, how have you been this long age? But I need not ask you, for you look delightfully. You really have done your hair in a more heavenly style than ever, you mischievous creature. Do you want to attract everybody? I assure you, my brother is quite in love with you already, and as for Mr. Tilney, but that is a settled thing. Even your modesty cannot doubt his attachment now. His coming back to Bath makes it too plain." "Oh, what would not I give to see him? I really am quite wild with impatience. My mother says he is the most delightful young man in the world. She saw him this morning, you know. You must introduce him to me. Is he in the house now? Look about, for heaven's sake. I assure you, I can hardly exist till I see him." "No," said Catherine, "he is not here. I cannot see him anywhere." "Oh, horrid! Am I never to be acquainted with him? How do you like my gown? I think it does not look amiss. The sleeves were entirely my own thought. Do you know, I get so immoderately sick of Bath. Your brother and I were agreeing this morning that, though it is vastly well to be here for a few weeks, we would not live here for millions. We soon found out that our tastes were exactly alike in preferring the country to every other place. Really, our opinions were so exactly the same, it was quite ridiculous. There was not a single point in which we differed. I would not have had you by for the world. You are such a sly thing, I am sure you would have made some droll remark or other about it." "No, indeed I should not." "Oh, yes, you would indeed. I know you better than you know yourself. You would have told us that we seemed born for each other, or some nonsense of that kind, which would have distressed me beyond conception. My cheeks would have been as red as your roses. I would not have had you by for the world. Indeed, you do me injustice. I would not have made so improper a remark upon any account, and besides, I am sure it would never have entered my head." Isabella smiled incredulously and talked the rest of the evening to James. Catherine's resolution of endeavoring to meet Miss Tilney again continued in full force the next morning, and till the usual moment of going to the pump-room she felt some alarm from the dread of a second prevention. But nothing of that kind occurred, no visitors appeared to delay them, and they all three set off in good time for the pump-room, where the ordinary course of events and conversation took place. Mr. Allen, after drinking his glass of water, joined some gentlemen to talk over the politics of the day and compare the accounts of their newspapers, and the ladies walked about together, noticing every new face and almost every new bonnet in the room. The female part of the Thorpe family, attended by James Morland, appeared among the crowd in less than a quarter of an hour, and Catherine immediately took her usual place by the side of her friend. James, who was now in constant attendance, maintained a similar position, and separating themselves from the rest of their party, they walked in that manner for some time, till Catherine began to doubt the happiness of a situation which, confining her entirely to her friend and brother, gave her very little share in the notice of either. They were always engaged in some sentimental discussion or lively dispute, but their sentiment was conveyed in such whispering voices, and their vivacity attended with so much laughter, that though Catherine's supporting opinion was not unfrequently called for by one or the other, she was never able to give any, from not having heard a word of the subject. At length, however, she was empowered to disengage herself from her friend by the avowed necessity of speaking to Miss Tilney, whom she most joyfully saw just entering the room with Mrs. Hughes, and whom she instantly joined. with a firmer determination to be acquainted than she might have had courage to command had she not been urged by the disappointment of the day before. Miss Tilney met her with great civility, returned her advances with equal goodwill, and they continued talking together as long as both parties remained in the room, and though in all probability not an observation was made, nor an expression used by either which had not been made and used some thousands of times before under that roof in every bath season, yet the merit of their being spoken with simplicity and truth and without personal conceit might be something uncommon. "How well your brother dances," was an artless exclamation of Catherine's towards the close of their conversation, which at once surprised and amused her companion. "Henry," she replied with a smile, "yes, he does dance very well. He must have thought it very odd to hear me say I was engaged the other evening when he saw me sitting down, but I really have been engaged the whole day to Mr. Thorpe." Miss Tilney could only bow. "You cannot think," added Catherine after a moment's silence, "how surprised I was to see him again. I felt so sure of his being quite gone away. When Henry had the pleasure of seeing you before, he was in Bath but for a couple of days. He came only to engage lodgings for us." "That never occurred to me, and of course, not seeing him anywhere, I thought he must be gone. Was not the young lady he danced with on Monday a Miss Smith?" "Yes, an acquaintance of Mrs. Hughes." "I dare say she was very glad to dance. Do you think her pretty?" "Not very." "He never comes to the pump room, I suppose?" "Yes, sometimes, but he has rid out this morning with my father." Mrs. Hughes now joined them and asked Miss Tilney if she was ready to go. "I hope I shall have the pleasure of seeing you again soon," said Catherine. "Shall you be at the cotillion ball tomorrow?" "Perhaps yes, I think we certainly shall." "I am glad of it, for we shall all be there." This civility was duly returned, and they parted. On Miss Tilney's side, with some knowledge of her new acquaintance's feelings, and on Catherine's, without the smallest consciousness of having explained them, she went home very happy. The morning had answered all her hopes, and the evening of the following day was now the object of expectation, the future good. What gown and what headdress she should wear on the occasion became her chief concern. She cannot be justified in it. Dress is at all times a frivolous distinction, and excessive solicitude about it often destroys its own aim. Catherine knew all this very well. Her great-aunt had read her a lecture on the subject only the Christmas before, and yet she lay awake 10 minutes on Wednesday night debating between her spotted and her tamboured muslin, and nothing but the shortness of the time prevented her buying a new one for the evening. This would have been an error in judgment, great though not uncommon, from which one of the other sex rather than her own, a brother rather than a great-aunt, might have warned her, for man only can be aware of the insensibility of man towards a new gown. It would be mortifying to the feelings of many ladies, could they be made to understand how little the heart of man is affected by what is costly or new in their attire, how little it is biased by the texture of their muslin, and how unsusceptible of peculiar tenderness towards the spotted, the sprigged, the mull, or the jaconet. Woman is fine for her own satisfaction alone. No man will admire her the more, no woman will like her the better for it. Neatness and fashion are enough for the former, and a something of shabbiness or impropriety will be most endearing to the latter. But not one of these grave reflections troubled the tranquillity of Catherine. She entered the rooms on Thursday evening with feelings very different from what had attended her thither the Monday before. She had then been exulting in her engagement to Thorpe, and was now chiefly anxious to avoid his sight, lest he should engage her again, for though she could not, dared not expect that Mr. Tilney should ask her a third time to dance, her wishes, hopes, and plans all centered in nothing less. Every young lady may feel for my heroine in this critical moment, for every young lady has at some time or other known the same agitation. All have been, or at least all have believed themselves to be, in danger from the pursuit of someone whom they wish to avoid, and all have been anxious for the attentions of someone whom they wished to please. As soon as they were joined by the Thorpes, Catherine's agony began. She fidgeted about if John Thorpe came towards her, hid herself as much as possible from his view, and when he spoke to her, pretended not to hear him. The cotillions were over, the country dancing beginning, and she saw nothing of the Tilneys. "Do not be frightened, my dear Catherine," whispered Isabella, "but I am really going to dance with your brother again. I declare positively it is quite shocking. I tell him he ought to be ashamed of himself, but you and John must keep us in countenance. Make haste, my dear creature, and come to us. John is just walked off, but he will be back in a moment." Catherine had neither time nor inclination to answer. The others walked away. John Thorpe was still in view, and she gave herself up for lost. That she might not appear, however, to observe or expect him, she kept her eyes intently fixed on her fan, and a self-condemnation for her folly in supposing that among such a crowd they should even meet with the Tilneys in any reasonable time, had just passed through her mind when she suddenly found herself addressed and again solicited to dance by Mr. Tilney himself. With what sparkling eyes and ready motion she granted his request, and with how pleasing a flutter of heart she went with him to the set, may be easily imagined. To escape, and, as she believed, so narrowly escape John Thorpe, and to be asked, so immediately on his joining her, asked by Mr. Tilney, as if he had sought her on purpose. It did not appear to her that life could supply any greater felicity. Scarcely had they worked themselves into the quiet possession of a place, however, when her attention was claimed by John Thorpe, who stood behind her. "Heyday, Miss Morland," said he, "what is the meaning of this?" "I thought you and I were to dance together." "I wonder you should think so, for you never asked me." "That is a good one, by Jove. I asked you as soon as I came into the room, and I was just going to ask you again, but when I turned round, you were gone. This is a cursed shabby trick. I only came for the sake of dancing with you, and I firmly believe you were engaged to me ever since Monday. Yes, I remember, I asked you while you were waiting in the lobby for your cloak. And here have I been telling all my acquaintance that I was going to dance with the prettiest girl in the room, and when they see you standing up with somebody else, they will quiz me famously. Oh, no, they will never think of me after such a description as that. By heavens, if they do not, I will kick them out of the room for blockheads. What chap have you there?" Catherine satisfied his curiosity. "Tilney," he repeated. I do not know him. A good figure of a man, well put together. Does he want a horse? Here's a friend of mine, Sam Fletcher, has got one to sell that would suit anybody, a famous, clever animal for the road, only 40 guineas. I had 50 minds to buy it myself, for it is one of my maxims always to buy a good horse when I meet with one, but it would not answer my purpose. It would not do for the field. I would give any money for a real good hunter. I have 3 now, the best that ever were backed. I would not take 800 guineas for them. Fletcher and I mean to get a house in Leicestershire against the next season. It is so uncomfortable, living at an inn." This was the last sentence by which he could weary Catherine's attention, for he was just then borne off by the resistless pressure of a long string of passing ladies. Her partner now drew near and said, "That gentleman would have put me out of patience had he stayed with you half a minute longer. He has no business to withdraw the attention of my partner from me. We have entered into a contract of mutual agreeableness for the space of an evening, and all our agreeableness belongs solely to each other for that time. Nobody can fasten themselves on the notice of one without injuring the rights of the other. I consider a country dance as an emblem of marriage. Fidelity and complaisance are the principal duties of both, and those men who do not choose to dance or marry themselves have no business with the partners or wives of their neighbors. But they are such very different things that you think they cannot be compared together. To be sure not. People that marry can never part, but must go and keep house together. People that dance only stand opposite each other in a long room for half an hour. And such is your definition of matrimony and dancing. Taken in that light, certainly, their resemblance is not striking, but I think I could place them in such a view. You will allow that in both, man has the advantage of choice, woman only the power of refusal, that in both it is an engagement between man and woman, formed for the advantage of each, and that when once entered into, they belong exclusively to each other till the moment of its dissolution, that it is their duty, each to endeavor to give the other no cause for wishing that he or she had bestowed themselves elsewhere, and their best interest to keep their own imaginations from wandering towards the perfections of their neighbors, or fancying that they should have been better off with anyone else. You will allow all this? Yes, to be sure, as you stated, all this sounds very well, but still they are so very different. I cannot look upon them at all in the same light, nor think the same duties belong to them. In one respect, there certainly is a difference. In marriage, the man is supposed to provide for the support of the woman to make the home agreeable to the man, he is to purvey, and she is to smile. But in dancing, their duties are exactly changed. The agreeableness, the compliance are expected from him, while she furnishes the fan and the lavender water. That, I suppose, was the difference of duties which struck you as rendering the conditions incapable of comparison. No, indeed, I never thought of that. Then I am quite at a loss. One thing, however, I must observe. This disposition on your side is rather alarming. You totally disallow any similarity in the obligations, and may I not thence infer that your notions of the duties of the dancing state are not so strict as your partner might wish? Have I not reason to fear that if the gentleman who spoke to you just now were to return, or if any other gentleman were to address you, there would be nothing to restrain you from conversing with him as long as you chose? Mr. Thorpe is such a very particular friend of my brother's that if he talks to me, I must talk to him again. But there are hardly 3 young men in the room besides him that I have any acquaintance with. And is that to be my only security? Alas, alas! Nay, I am sure you cannot have a better, for if I do not know anybody, it is impossible for me to talk to them, and, besides, I do not want to talk to anybody. Now you have given me a security worth having, and I shall proceed with courage. Do you find Bath as agreeable as when I had the honor of making the inquiry before? Yes, quite. More so, indeed. More so? Take care, or you will forget to be tired of it at the proper time. You ought to be tired at the end of 6 weeks. I do not think I should be tired if I were to stay here 6 months. Bath, compared with London, has little variety, and so everybody finds out every year. For 6 weeks I allow Bath is pleasant enough, but beyond that it is the most tiresome place in the world. You would be told so by people of all descriptions, who come regularly every winter, lengthen their 6 weeks into 10 or 12, and go away at last because they can afford to stay no longer. Well, other people must judge for themselves, and those who go to London may think nothing of Bath. But I, who live in a small retired village in the country, can never find greater sameness in such a place as this than in my own home, for here are a variety of amusements, a variety of things to be seen and done all day long, which I can know nothing of there. You are not fond of the country. Yes, I am. I have always lived there, and always been very happy. But certainly there is much more sameness in a country life than in a Bath life. One day in the country is exactly like another. But then you spend your time so much more rationally in the country. Do I? Do you not? I do not believe there is much difference. Here you are, in pursuit only of amusement all day long. And so I am at home, only I do not find so much of it. I walk about here, and so I do there, but here I see a variety of people in every street, and there I can only go and call on Mrs. Allen." Mr. Tilney was very much amused. "Only go and call on Mrs. Allen," he repeated. "What a picture of intellectual poverty! However, when you sink into this abyss again, you will have more to say. You will be able to talk of Bath, and of all that you did here. Oh, yes, I shall never be in want of something to talk of again to Mrs. Allen or anybody else. I really believe I shall always be talking of Bath when I am at home again. I do like it so very much. If I could but have Papa and Mamma and the rest of them here, I suppose I should be too happy. James's coming, my eldest brother, is quite delightful, and especially as it turns out that the very family we are just got so intimate with are his intimate friends already. Oh, who can ever be tired of Bath? Not those who bring such fresh feelings of every sort to it as you do, but papas and mammas and brothers and intimate friends are a good deal gone by to most of the frequenters of Bath, and the honest relish of balls and plays and everyday sights is past with them. Here their conversation closed, the demands of the dance becoming now too importunate for a divided attention. Soon after their reaching the bottom of the set, Catherine perceived herself to be earnestly regarded by a gentleman who stood among the lookers-on, immediately behind her partner. He was a very handsome man, of a commanding aspect, past the bloom, but not past the vigor of life, and with his eye still directed towards her, she saw him presently address Mr. Tilney in a familiar whisper. Confused by his notice, and blushing from the fear of its being excited by something wrong in her appearance, she turned away her head. But while she did so, the gentleman retreated, and her partner, coming nearer, said, "I see that you guess what I have just been asked. That gentleman knows your name, and you have a right to know his. It is General Tilney, my father." Catherine's answer was only, "Oh," but it was an "oh," expressing everything needful, attention to his words, and perfect reliance on their truth. With real interest and strong admiration did her eye now follow the general as he moved through the crowd, and "how handsome a family they are," was her secret remark. In chatting with Miss Tilney before the evening concluded, a new source of felicity arose to her. She had never taken a country walk since her arrival in Bath. Ms. Tilney, to whom all the commonly frequented environs were familiar, spoke of them in terms which made her all eagerness to know them too, and on her openly fearing that she might find nobody to go with her, it was proposed by the brother and sister that they should join in a walk some morning or other. "I shall like it," she cried, "beyond anything in the world, and do not let us put it off. Let us go tomorrow." This was readily agreed to, with only a proviso of Miss Tilney's that it did not rain, which Catherine was sure it would not. At 12 o'clock they were to call for her in Pulteney Street, and "remember, 12 o'clock" was her parting speech to her new friend. Of her other, her older, her more established friend, Isabella, of whose fidelity and worth she had enjoyed a fortnight's experience, she scarcely saw anything during the evening. Yet though longing to make her acquainted with her happiness, she cheerfully submitted to the wish of Mr. Allen, which took them rather early away, and her spirits danced within her as she danced in her chair all the way home. Chapter 11. The morrow brought a very sober-looking morning, the sun making only a few efforts to appear, and Catherine augured from it everything most favorable to her wishes. A bright morning so early in the year, she allowed, would generally turn to rain, but a cloudy one foretold improvement as the day advanced. She applied to Mr. Allen for confirmation of her hopes, but Mr. Allen, not having his own skies and barometer about him, declined giving any absolute promise of sunshine. She applied to Mrs. Allen, and Mrs. Allen's opinion was more positive. She had no doubt in the world of its being a very fine day if the clouds would only go off and the sun keep out. At about 11 o'clock, however, a few specks of small rain upon the windows caught Catherine's watchful eye, and "oh, dear, I do believe it will be wet," broke from her in a most desponding tone. "I thought how it would be," said Mrs. Allen. "No walk for me today," sighed Catherine, "but perhaps it may come to nothing, or it may hold up before 12. "Perhaps it may, but then, my dear, it will be so dirty." "Oh, that will not signify. I never mind dirt." "No," replied her friend very placidly, "I know you never mind dirt." After a short pause, "It comes on faster and faster," said Catherine as she stood watching at a window. "So it does indeed. If it keeps raining, the streets will be very wet. There are 4 umbrellas up already. How I hate the sight of an umbrella. They are disagreeable things to carry. I would much rather take a chair at any time." It was such a nice-looking morning. I felt so convinced it would be dry. Anybody would have thought so, indeed. There will be very few people in the pump-room if it rains all the morning. I hope Mr. Allen will put on his greatcoat when he goes, but I dare say he will not, for he had rather do anything in the world than walk out in a greatcoat. I wonder he should dislike it. It must be so comfortable. The rain continued, fast though not heavy. Catherine went every 5 minutes to the clock, threatening on each return that if it still kept on raining another 5 minutes, she would give up the matter as hopeless. The clock struck 12, and it still rained. "You will not be able to go, my dear." I do not quite despair yet. I shall not give it up till 12:15. This is just the time of day for it to clear up, and I do think it looks a little lighter. There, it is 20 minutes after 12, and now I shall give it up entirely. Oh, that we had such weather here as they had at Udolpho, or at least in Tuscany and the south of France, the night that poor St. Aubin died. Such beautiful weather. At 12:30, when Catherine's anxious attention to the weather was over and she could no longer claim any merit from its amendment, the sky began voluntarily to clear. A gleam of sunshine took her quite by surprise. She looked round, the clouds were parting, and she instantly returned to the window to watch over and encourage the happy appearance. 10 minutes more made it certain that a bright afternoon would succeed and justified the opinion of Mrs. Allen, who had always thought it would clear up. But whether Catherine might still expect her friends, whether there had not been too much rain for Miss Tilney to venture, must yet be a question. It was too dirty for Mrs. Allen to accompany her husband to the pump-room. He accordingly set off by himself, and Catherine had barely watched him down the street when her notice was claimed by the approach of the same 2 open carriages, containing the same 3 people that had surprised her so much a few mornings back. "Isabella, my brother, and Mr. Thorpe, I declare, they are coming for me perhaps, but I shall not go. I cannot go, indeed, for you know Miss Tilney may still call." Mrs. Allen agreed to it. John Thorpe was soon with them, and his voice was with them yet sooner, for on the stairs he was calling out to Miss Morland to be quick. "Make haste, make haste," as he threw open the door. "Put on your hat this moment. There is no time to be lost." "We are going to Bristol. How do you do, Mrs. Allen?" "To Bristol? Is not that a great way off? But, however, I cannot go with you today because I am engaged. I expect some friends every moment." This was, of course, vehemently talked down as no reason at all. Mrs. Allen was called on to second him, and the 2 others walked in to give their assistance. "My sweetest Catherine, is not this delightful? We shall have a most heavenly drive. You are to thank your brother and me for the scheme. It darted into our heads at breakfast time, I verily believe at the same instant, and we should have been off 2 hours ago if it had not been for this detestable rain. But it does not signify. The nights are moonlight, and we shall do delightfully. Oh, I am in such ecstasies at the thoughts of a little country air and quiet, so much better than going to the lower rooms. We shall drive directly to Clifton and dine there, and, as soon as dinner is over, if there is time for it, go on to King's Weston." "I doubt our being able to do so much," said Morland. "You croaking fellow," cried Thorpe, "we shall be able to do 10 times more." King's Weston, aye, and Blaise Castle too, and anything else we can hear of, but here is your sister, says she will not go." "Blaise Castle," cried Catherine, "what is that?" "The finest place in England. Worth going 50 miles at any time to see." "What, is it really a castle, an old castle?" "The oldest in the kingdom." "But is it like what one reads of?" "Exactly, the very same. But now, really, are there towers and long galleries?" "By dozens." "Then I should like to see it, but I cannot go." "Not go, my beloved creature, what do you mean?" "I cannot go, because," looking down as she spoke, fearful of Isabella's smile, "I expect Miss Tilney and her brother to call on me to take a country walk. They promised to come at 12, only it rained, but now, as it is so fine, I dare say they will be here soon." "Not they, indeed," cried Thorpe, "for, as we turned into Broad Street, I saw them. Does he not drive a phaeton with bright chestnuts?" "I do not know, indeed." "Yes, I know he does. I saw him. You are talking of the man you danced with last night, are not you?" "Yes." "Well, I saw him at that moment turn up the Lansdowne Road, driving a smart-looking girl." "Did you, indeed?" "Did, upon my soul. Knew him again directly, and he seemed to have got some very pretty cattle, too. It is very odd, but I suppose they thought it would be too dirty for a walk." And well they might, for I never saw so much dirt in my life. Walk! You could no more walk than you could fly. It has not been so dirty the whole winter. It is ankle-deep everywhere. Isabella corroborated it. "My dearest Catherine, you cannot form an idea of the dirt. Come, you must go. You cannot refuse going now." "I should like to see the castle, but may we go all over it? May we go up every staircase and into every suite of rooms?" "Yes, yes, every hole and corner." "But then, if they should only be gone out for an hour till it is drier, and call by and by?" "Make yourself easy, there is no danger of that, for I heard Tilney hallooing to a man who was just passing by on horseback that they were going as far as Wick Rocks." "Then I will. Shall I go, Mrs. Allen?" "Just as you please, my dear." "Mrs. Allen, you must persuade her to go," was the general cry. Mrs. Allen was not inattentive to it. "Well, my dear," said she, "suppose you go." And in 2 minutes they were off. Catherine's feelings, as she got into the carriage, were in a very unsettled state, divided between regret for the loss of one great pleasure and the hope of soon enjoying another, almost its equal in degree, however unlike in kind. She could not think the Tilneys had acted quite well by her in so readily giving up their engagement without sending her any message of excuse. It was now but an hour later than the time fixed on for the beginning of their walk, and, in spite of what she had heard of the prodigious accumulation of dirt in the course of that hour, she could not, from her own observation, help thinking that they might have gone with very little inconvenience. To feel herself slighted by them was very painful. On the other hand, the delight of exploring an edifice like Udolpho, as her fancy represented Blaise Castle to be, was such a counterpoise of good as might console her for almost anything. They passed briskly down Pulteney Street and through Laura Place without the exchange of many words. Thorpe talked to his horse, and she meditated, by turns, on broken promises and broken arches, phaetons and false hangings, Tilneys and trap-doors. As they entered Argyle Buildings, however, she was roused by this address from her companion. "Who is that girl who looked at you so hard as she went by?" "Who? Where?" "On the right-hand pavement. She must be almost out of sight now." Catherine looked round and saw Miss Tilney leaning on her brother's arm, walking slowly down the street. She saw them both looking back at her. "Stop, stop, Mr. Thorpe," she impatiently cried. "It is Miss Tilney, it is indeed. How could you tell me they were gone? Stop, stop, I will get out this moment and go to them." But to what purpose did she speak? Thorpe only lashed his horse into a brisker trot. The Tilneys, who had soon ceased to look after her, were in a moment out of sight round the corner of Laura Place, and in another moment she was herself whisked into the market-place. Still, however, and during the length of another street, she entreated him to stop. "Pray, pray stop, Mr. Thorpe. I cannot go on. I will not go on. I must go back to Miss Tilney." But Mr. Thorpe only laughed, smacked his whip, encouraged his horse, made odd noises, and drove on, and Catherine, angry and vexed as she was, having no power of getting away, was obliged to give up the point and submit. Her reproaches, however, were not spared. "How could you deceive me so, Mr. Thorpe? How could you say that you saw them driving up the Lansdowne road? I would not have had it happen so for the world. They must think it so strange, so rude of me. To go by them, too, without saying a word. You do not know how vexed I am. I shall have no pleasure at Clifton, nor in anything else. I had rather, 10,000 times rather, get out now and walk back to them. How could you say you saw them driving out in a phaeton?" Thorpe defended himself very stoutly, declared he had never seen two men so much alike in his life, and would hardly give up the point of its having been Tilney himself. Their drive, even when this subject was over, was not likely to be very agreeable. Catherine's complaisance was no longer what it had been in their former airing. She listened reluctantly, and her replies were short. Blaise Castle remained her only comfort. Towards that, she still looked at intervals with pleasure, though rather than be disappointed of the promised walk, and especially rather than be thought ill of by the Tilneys, she would willingly have given up all the happiness which its walls could supply. The happiness of a progress through a long suite of lofty rooms, exhibiting the remains of magnificent furniture, though now, for many years, deserted. The happiness of being stopped in their way along narrow, winding vaults by a low, grated door, or even of having their lamp, their only lamp, extinguished by a sudden gust of wind, and of being left in total darkness. In the meanwhile they proceeded on their journey without any mischance, and were within view of the town of Keynsham, when a halloo from Morland, who was behind them, made his friend pull up to know what was the matter. The others then came close enough for conversation, and Morland said, "We had better go back, Thorpe. It is too late to go on today. Your sister thinks so, as well as I. We have been exactly an hour coming from Pulteney Street, very little more than 7 miles, and, I suppose, we have at least 8 more to go. It will never do. We set out a great deal too late. We had much better put it off till another day, and turn round." "It is all one to me," replied Thorpe rather angrily, and instantly turning his horse, they were on their way back to Bath. "If your brother had not got such a beast to drive," said he soon afterwards, "we might have done it very well. My horse would have trotted to Clifton within the hour, if left to himself, and I have almost broke my arm with pulling him into that cursed broken-winded jade's pace. Morland is a fool for not keeping a horse and gig of his own." "No, he is not," said Catherine warmly, "for I am sure he could not afford it." "And why cannot he afford it?" "Because he has not money enough." "And whose fault is that?" "Nobody's, that I know of." Thorpe then said something in the loud, incoherent way to which he had often recourse about its being a thing to be miserly, and that if people who rolled in money could not afford things, he did not know who could, which Catherine did not even endeavor to understand. Disappointed of what was to have been the consolation for her first disappointment, she was less and less disposed either to be agreeable herself or to find her companion, and they returned to Pulteney Street without her speaking 20 words. As she entered the house, the footman told her that a gentleman and lady had called and inquired for her a few minutes after her setting off, that, when he told them she was gone out with Mr. Thorpe, the lady had asked whether any message had been left for her, and on his saying no, had felt for a card, but said she had none about her, and went away. Pondering over these heart-rending tidings, Catherine walked slowly upstairs. At the head of them she was met by Mr. Allen, who, on hearing the reason of their speedy return, said, "I am glad your brother had so much sense. I am glad you are come back." It was a strange, wild scheme. They all spent the evening together at Thorpe's. Catherine was disturbed and out of spirits, but Isabella seemed to find a pool of commerce, in the fate of which she shared, by private partnership with Morland, a very good equivalent for the quiet and country air of an inn at Clifton. Her satisfaction, too, in not being at the lower rooms was spoken more than once. "How I pity the poor creatures that are going there. How glad I am that I am not amongst them. I wonder whether it will be a full ball or not. They have not begun dancing yet. I would not be there for all the world. It is so delightful to have an evening now and then to oneself. I dare say it will not be a very good ball. I know the Mitchells will not be there. I am sure I pity everybody that is. But I dare say, Mr. Morland, you long to be at it, do not you? I am sure you do. Well, pray do not let anybody here be a restraint on you. I dare say we could do very well without you, but you men think yourselves of such consequence." Catherine could almost have accused Isabella of being wanting in tenderness towards herself and her sorrows, so very little did they appear to dwell on her mind, and so very inadequate was the comfort she offered. "Do not be so dull, my dearest creature," she whispered. "You will quite break my heart. It was amazingly shocking, to be sure, but the Tilneys were entirely to blame. Why were not they more punctual? It was dirty, indeed, but what did that signify? I am sure John and I should not have minded it. I never mind going through anything, where a friend is concerned. That is my disposition, and John is just the same. He has amazing strong feelings. Good heavens, what a delightful hand you have got. Kings, I vow, I never was so happy in my life. I would 50 times rather you should have them than myself. And now I may dismiss my heroine to the sleepless couch, which is the true heroine's portion, to a pillow strewed with thorns and wet with tears. And lucky may she think herself if she get another good night's rest in the course of the next 3 months. Chapter 12. "Mrs. Allen," said Catherine the next morning, "will there be any harm in my calling on Miss Tilney today? I shall not be easy till I have explained everything." "Go, by all means, my dear, only put on a white gown. Miss Tilney always wears white." Catherine cheerfully complied, and being properly equipped, was more impatient than ever to be at the pump-room, that she might inform herself of General Tilney's lodgings, for though she believed they were in Milsom Street, she was not certain of the house, and Mrs. Allen's wavering convictions only made it more doubtful. To Milsom Street she was directed, and having made herself perfect in the number, hastened away with eager steps and a beating heart to pay her visit, explain her conduct, and be forgiven, tripping lightly through the churchyard, and resolutely turning away her eyes, that she might not be obliged to see her beloved Isabella and her dear family, who, she had reason to believe, were in a shop hard by. She reached the house without any impediment, looked at the number, knocked at the door, and inquired for Miss Tilney. The man believed Miss Tilney to be at home, but was not quite certain. Would she be pleased to send up her name? She gave her card. In a few minutes the servant returned, and with a look which did not quite confirm his words, said he had been mistaken, for that Miss Tilney was walked out. Catherine, with a blush of mortification, left the house. She felt almost persuaded that Miss Tilney was at home, and too much offended to admit her, and as she retired down the street, could not withhold one glance at the drawing-room windows, in expectation of seeing her there. But no one appeared at them. At the bottom of the street, however, she looked back again, and then, not at a window, but issuing from the door, she saw Miss Tilney herself. She was followed by a gentleman, whom Catherine believed to be her father, and they turned up towards Edgar's buildings. Catherine, in deep mortification, proceeded on her way. She could almost be angry herself at such angry incivility, but she checked the resentful sensation. She remembered her own ignorance. She knew not how such an offense as hers might be classed by the laws of worldly politeness, to what a degree of unforgivingness it might with propriety lead, nor to what rigors of rudeness in return it might justly make her amenable. Dejected and humbled, she had even some thoughts of not going with the others to the theater that night, but it must be confessed that they were not of long continuance, for she soon recollected, in the first place, that she was without any excuse for staying at home, and, in the second, that it was a play she wanted very much to see. To the theater accordingly they all went. No Tilneys appeared to plague or please her. She feared that, amongst the many perfections of the family, a fondness for plays was not to be ranked, but perhaps it was because they were habituated to the finer performances of the London stage, which she knew, on Isabella's authority, rendered everything else of the kind quite horrid. She was not deceived in her own expectation of pleasure. The comedy so well suspended her care that no one, observing her during the first 4 acts, would have supposed she had any wretchedness about her. On the beginning of the 5th, however, the sudden view of Mr. Henry Tilney and his father joining a party in the opposite box recalled her to anxiety and distress. The stage could no longer excite genuine merriment, no longer keep her whole attention. Every other look, upon an average, was directed towards the opposite box, and, for the space of 2 entire scenes, did she thus watch Henry Tilney, without being once able to catch his eye. No longer could he be suspected of indifference for a play. His notice was never withdrawn from the stage during 2 whole scenes. At length, however, he did look towards her, and he bowed. But such a bow! No smile, no continued observance attended it. His eyes were immediately returned to their former direction. Catherine was restlessly miserable. She could almost have run round to the box in which he sat and forced him to hear her explanation. Feelings rather natural than heroic possessed her, instead of considering her own dignity injured by this ready condemnation. Instead of proudly resolving, in conscious innocence, to show her resentment towards him who could harbor a doubt of it, to leave to him all the trouble of seeking an explanation, and to enlighten him on the past only by avoiding his sight or flirting with somebody else, she took to herself all the shame of misconduct, or at least of its appearance, and was only eager for an opportunity of explaining its cause. The play concluded. The curtain fell. Henry Tilney was no longer to be seen where he had hitherto sat, but his father remained, and perhaps he might be now coming round to their box. She was right. In a few minutes he appeared, and, making his way through the then thinning rows, spoke with like calm politeness to Mrs. Allen and her friend. Not with such calmness was he answered by the latter. "Oh, Mr. Tilney, I have been quite wild to speak to you, and make my apologies. You must have thought me so rude, but indeed it was not my own fault, was it, Mrs. Allen? Did not they tell me that Mr. Tilney and his sister were gone out in a phaeton together, and then what could I do? But I had 10,000 times rather have been with you, now had not I, Mrs. Allen." "My dear, you tumble my gown," was Mrs. Allen's reply. Her assurance, however, standing sole as it did, was not thrown away. It brought a more cordial, more natural smile into his countenance, and he replied in a tone which retained only a little affected reserve. "We were much obliged to you, at any rate, for wishing us a pleasant walk after our passing you in Argyle Street. You were so kind as to look back on purpose." "But indeed I did not wish you a pleasant walk. I never thought of such a thing, but I begged Mr. Thorpe so earnestly to stop, I called out to him as soon as ever I saw you. Now Mrs. Allen did not." "Oh, you were not there, but indeed I did, and if Mr. Thorpe would only have stopped, I would have jumped out and run after you." Is there a Henry in the world who could be insensible to such a declaration? Henry Tilney, at least, was not. With a yet sweeter smile, he said everything that need be said of his sister's concern, regret, and dependence on Catherine's honor. "Oh, do not say Miss Tilney was not angry," cried Catherine, "because I know she was, for she would not see me this morning when I called. I saw her walk out of the house the next minute after my leaving it. I was hurt, but I was not affronted. Perhaps you did not know I had been there. I was not within at the time, but I heard of it from Eleanor, and she has been wishing ever since to see you, to explain the reason of such incivility, but perhaps I can do it as well. It was nothing more than that my father—" They were just preparing to walk out, and he, being hurried for time and not caring to have it put off, made a point of her being denied. That was all, I do assure you. She was very much vexed, and meant to make her apology as soon as possible. Catherine's mind was greatly eased by this information, yet a something of solicitude remained, from which sprang the following question, thoroughly artless in itself, though rather distressing to the gentleman. "But, Mr. Tilney, why were you less generous than your sister? If she felt such confidence in my good intentions and could suppose it to be only a mistake, why should you be so ready to take offense?" "Me, I take offense. Nay, I am sure by your look, when you came into the box, you were angry." Angry. I could have no right." "Well, nobody would have thought you had no right who saw your face," he replied by asking her to make room for him and talking of the play. He remained with them some time, and was only too agreeable for Catherine to be contented when he went away. Before they parted, however, it was agreed that the projected walk should be taken as soon as possible, and, setting aside the misery of his quitting their box, she was, upon the whole, left one of the happiest creatures in the world. While talking to each other, she had observed with some surprise that John Thorpe, who was never in the same part of the house for 10 minutes together, was engaged in conversation with General Tilney, and she felt something more than surprise when she thought she could perceive herself the object of their attention and discourse. What could they have to say of her? She feared General Tilney did not like her appearance. She found it was implied in his preventing her admittance to his daughter rather than postpone his own walk a few minutes. "How came Mr. Thorpe to know your father?" was her anxious inquiry as she pointed them out to her companion. He knew nothing about it, but his father, like every military man, had a very large acquaintance. When the entertainment was over, Thorpe came to assist them in getting out. Catherine was the immediate object of his gallantry, and while they waited in the lobby for a chair, he prevented the inquiry which had traveled from her heart almost to the tip of her tongue by asking, in a consequential manner, whether she had seen him talking with General Tilney. "He is a fine old fellow, upon my soul. Stout, active, looks as young as his son. I have a great regard for him, I assure you, a gentlemanlike, good sort of fellow as ever lived." "But how came you to know him?" "Know him? There are few people much about town that I do not know. I have met him forever at the Bedford, and I knew his face again today the moment he came into the billiard-room. One of the best players we have, by the by, and we had a little touch together, though I was almost afraid of him at first. The odds were 5-4 against me, and if I had not made one of the cleanest strokes that perhaps ever was made in this world. I took his ball exactly, but I could not make you understand it without a table. However, I did beat him, a very fine fellow, as rich as a Jew. I should like to dine with him. I dare say he gives famous dinners. But what do you think we have been talking of? You? Yes, by heavens, and the General thinks you the finest girl in Bath." "Oh, nonsense. How can you say so?" "And what do you think I said?" lowering his voice. "Well done, General," said I am quite of your mind." Here Catherine, who was much less gratified by his admiration than by General Tilney's, was not sorry to be called away by Mr. Allen. Thorpe, however, would see her to her chair, and, till she entered it, continued the same kind of delicate flattery, in spite of her entreating him to have done. That General Tilney, instead of disliking, should admire her, was very delightful, and she joyfully thought that there was not one of the family whom she need now fear to meet. The evening had done more, much more, for her than could have been expected.